Today we're taking a look at an iPhone 7 Plus that I purchased on eBay as being in open box condition. And as you can see, this one is in the pretty rare product red color option. There's a bit of a backstory to this purchase, so the listing on eBay was pretty vague. The seller didn't have any photos of the device actually turned on, and there was no photos of the serial number or IMEI either. And the listing also had a quantity of 2 of these available. So yeah, I was not able to confirm that this would actually be running its original software version iOS 10 just from the listing itself. This was priced at $150, but I ended up making an offer for $130 and the seller accepted. And fast forward to today when I was finally able to get mine in, I was now able to check the serial number and IMEI. From those, I got some really good news, so I think if all goes well, we should be running iOS 10. First off, I checked the serial number on Apple's Check Coverage website, and that reports that the device has never been activated. And I used a website called Reincubate, I hope I'm saying that correctly, but that told me that the production date for this device is in March of 2017. But yeah, with all of that backstory out of the way, let's go ahead and remove the lid from the box now. And okay, it looks like we have our literature packet here on top, and it does have the insert for the product red model. But of course, the real star of the show is the iPhone itself. It is in its original plastic seal. So let's go ahead and use the pull tab to lift up the device. And wow, this is totally my first impression as well. I have never seen a product red 7 Plus in person. It's a really vibrant finish to the aluminum, and the silver Apple logo as well as the white bezel and silver home button just look so crisp. But setting this to the side really quickly, we'll take a look at the accessories. So yeah, it looks like the usual here. So the small 5-watt USB-A power adapter as well as our earpods here. These of course have the lightning connector, and they include the lightning to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter. But lastly, in here we have our lightning to USB cable. So getting back to the iPhone itself now, one thing that I am unsure is the battery. I'd say that there is a pretty high chance that this battery will not charge up. And I say that just because of past experience I've had with iPhones that have sat in a box unused for many years. But of course I'm still keeping my hopes up, and I want to give the battery a try, so let's get it connected to power now. Okay, well sadly it looks like the device is in a state of boot looping. As I said, unfortunately, this is pretty common with devices like this. Basically, the device receives a small amount of power, and then it thinks it has enough to start up, but then it just ends up in a cycle of that never ends. I'm going to try a few different power adapters. I think the one I have it connected to now is 12 watts. But if that doesn't work out, I will have to look into replacing the battery on this device. Okay, well, unfortunately, I did not have any success charging up the battery in this iPhone. I tried pretty much every power adapter in my collection, ranging from 5 watts all the way up to 85. And the device only ever showed the boot looping symptom, even after leaving it to charge overnight. So I ended up purchasing a battery for this from eBay. This is a genuine Apple part. So it has been used. It's supposed to have between 80 and 90% health. This only cost around $10. Plus it did come with the adhesive strips. So I'm ready to go ahead and get started with the battery replacement now. First though, I will need to remove the film from the device, just because the screens on these kind of open like a backwards book. So since this film is hinged at the top, this will not be able to stay on. So let's pull that off now. I always love the satisfying sound that this makes. And there we go. This is definitely the most fingerprint free we will ever see this 7 Plus. Let's get these pentalobe screws carefully removed from each side of the lightning port. Next up, we have to get the screen pulled off. It's adhered down with an adhesive seal around the edges, which those are usually decently hard to get through on brand new models. So I'll go ahead and attach my suction cup here. This one is actually connected to a mirror. And as I kind of bend this backward, we should eventually be able to get in between the body and the display. I really like to use this thin little plastic tool. This is actually meant for cutting open the newer iMacs. Okay, well, I finally made an entrance here. I did end up having to apply some heat. So we're having to get through not only adhesive, but also some clips around the sides. And once you just work at that for a while, the display will eventually come free. I do have to remember here that there are connectors kind of in this area and this area. And there we go, the 7 Plus has opened up. But now we need to remove these two brackets that are covering the connectors for the display. I think these screws are called Y000 and they have been notoriously difficult for me in the past. I've had so many of these that want to strip out. So I'm really hoping that these do not do that. Okay, well sure enough one of these screws did strip out. Thankfully I was able to get it removed though. I really don't know what goes on with these screws to make them always strip out. They must be really cheaply made. But now with those brackets removed, we can start to pull off some connectors. We will start off first with the battery. So that one's off, and now we have a connector here for the display. And there's actually another one for the display hidden under there. Then we just have one more at the top. And now the display panel is free. So turning our attention to the battery here, there are 3 adhesive strips to aid in the removal process. And in my experience, those can be pretty finicky just because of the angle they have to be pulled out here. So usually when I do this, I like to remove the Taptic engine to give some extra working space. Anyway, once this is free, we have better access to those pull tabs like I mentioned. So I'm just going to pull on each of these now. Wish me luck that they all come out in one piece. If these strips break, it is an absolute pain to get these batteries out. So now that we have this one pulled out, we will look at the manufacturing date, and it looks like March of 2017. We will get our replacement kind of test fit in here, and I'll reinstall those parts I removed. Then we will get the display put back in place. And now that those 3 connectors are attached, I will plug in the battery. So now just to test, let's see if the iPhone will power up. So I wasn't getting any signs of life quite yet, but let's connect a lightning cable. And yes, we do see the battery charging screen here, which this is a pretty good sign. I'm pretty sure this battery indicator was only used through iOS 10. I'm going to leave the iPhone now just until it powers up. I just want to be sure that everything is working okay with the battery before I put the adhesive strips down and the shields back over the connectors. Okay, well great news, the iPhone has powered up and we are definitely running iOS 10. And that's really easy to spot by the thin font here for the hello in different languages. This was changed to a thicker font with iOS 11, and we also see that thinner battery icon that I mentioned before. Now let's get that battery adhered down and the shields put back on the connectors. And there we go, everything went really well, so we can go ahead and seal back up the iPhone. So let's go through the setup process now. Okay, it looks like the device is needing a SIM card. I'm pretty sure this was listed as being carrier unlocked when I checked the IMEI. So I'll go ahead and throw an AT&T SIM card in here to see if that works. And yes, that was able to get us through. Here's an interesting screen during the setup. This is instructing you how to use the new home button. So basically 3 different levels of intensity. And the setup was just calling this out because this was the first iPhone to have a solid state home button. And there we go, we see the iOS 10 home screen. Also here on the second page, we do get the Apple pre-installed applications because this is the original install of the software for the device. Let's jump into settings so we can see which version of iOS 10 we have. And okay, it looks like we have 10.2.1 here. So I'm pretty sure this was the first version available for the Product Red models, as it came out in early 2017, about halfway into iOS 10's life cycle. We also get confirmation of the 128GB storage capacity. This particular color was only offered with 128 or 256. Also, while we are here in settings, I want to check out the wallpaper selection, mainly because I'm curious to see if there are any exclusive options for the Product Red. I know in some of the marketing for this iPhone there was an interesting silver orb image. So going into the wallpaper category here, let's look for that. And checking under the stills category here, it looks like unfortunately we do not get that exclusive image. We will see some of these orbs that were exclusive to the iPhone 7s, but just not that specific color I was thinking of. So that's a little bit of a bummer. We also do have the live category here. All of these images were carried over from the iPhone 6s. And of course they animate using the 3D touch feature in the display. We also have the dynamic category. These were carried over from iOS 7. So the red option here does look pretty good with this color. Under the battery section here in settings, we will not see the battery health function. That feature was not added until the later versions of iOS 11. While I'm in here though, I will turn on the battery percentage. So now I'm going to take a little bit of time to get to know this iPhone 7 Plus. I'll get some apps and games downloaded as well as some music synced, and then we will take a closer look at the device. Okay, well now that I have gotten this iPhone all set up how I like, let's take a second to talk about its history. So the 7 and 7 Plus were released back in September of 2016. They were the successors to the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus. It was a little bit surprising that the iPhone 7 models did not bring a new design. Apple had been in a habit since 2009 of releasing an S model one year that shared the previous iPhone's design. Then always the next whole number iPhone would bring a new design, so that happened with the iPhone 4, 5, and 6. But the 7 and 7 Plus were still a very familiar design. So it was basically just an aluminum design with rounded corners. Not that it was necessarily a bad thing that the iPhone 7 models did not bring a new design. It was just that Apple broke their pattern with doing so in this lineup. First off, there was an updated antenna design, so they now kind of curved around the chassis, instead of also going straight across on the back panel here, like the 6 and 6S did. There were also new camera designs, so the 7 Plus here was the first to receive two rear lenses. These were so much larger than what we had before. The standard iPhone 7 stuck with one lens, although it was larger as well. Optical image stabilization with these cameras was now standard for both models rather than being exclusive to the Plus. But the second telephoto lens on the Plus enabled a new portrait mode feature. This would create a background bokeh effect, kind of similar to what you could achieve on a DSLR camera. Here's a quick photo I snapped using that feature. So as you can see, it's a little bit blurry and not too perfect around the edges. But back then, it was just so cool to achieve quality like this in a device that fits in your pocket. This was one of the earliest steps Apple took toward a pro camera system. You also had the 2x zoom option here, all the way up to 10x. And there was a nice upgrade to the front-facing camera as well. This was now a 7 megapixel sensor compared to the 5 that we had on the 6S. And it could now record video in 1080p. Another big part of the iPhone 7 design was stereo speakers. The 6S and older only had a mono speaker at the bottom, so this was a really welcome upgrade. To achieve this, the top earpiece acted as a secondary speaker to the bottom one. So if you're especially watchful, you'll be able to notice that the earpiece speaker here is slightly larger for the 7 and 7 Plus. There was also now a quad element flash on the back, and the display panels were slightly brighter than before. Of course, they did retain the 3D touch feature that had just launched on the 6S. The iPhone 7 models were infamous for removing the 3.5mm headphone jack that we had been used to forever. It definitely felt like something that was a little bit too soon, but at least Apple included that Lightning to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter in the box with every iPhone 7. Another huge part of the iPhone 7 story, as well as the removal of that headphone jack, is the original AirPods. So these were announced alongside the iPhone 7, and I think it's fair to say that these are the reason Apple removed that headphone jack. AirPods are absolutely everywhere today, but back in 2016, wireless audio in general wasn't too common. I am interested to see if these will pair with the 7 Plus here. Okay, well, I did have to hold the pairing button, but now we see the connection screen. And yeah, the audio is coming through perfectly. So this is really cool to see the original AirPods with the original iPhone they launched with. As I kind of touched on before, the home button was also new for the iPhone 7. So this was solid state, meaning it did not physically click inward. Instead, it would just sense your finger on it and replicate a click with vibrations. This was definitely something to get used to, and you didn't have exactly the same clicking sensation as before. But it did help make this the first IP67 water and dust resistant iPhone. There was also that adhesive seal around the display helping that out that was also present on the 6S. And inside, the 7 models got a nice boost in performance. So replacing the dual-core A9 chip, there was a new quad-core A10 Fusion. This was the first implementation of the performance efficiency core setup that Apple Silicon has come to be known for. So in this application, it was 2 performance and 2 efficiency cores. Although it couldn't use all 4 of those cores at once, like the future 6-core chips could. The standard iPhone 7 stuck with the 2 GB of RAM, but the 7 Plus here received 3. This device ended up receiving software support through iOS 15 in 2021. So not exactly a huge amount of support, at least in the whole iPhone universe. The 6S release before this also received through iOS 15. So that was a little bit surprising. You'd think the 7 Plus here could have at least got through iOS 16. These models did start with 32 GB of storage though, so that was a nice upgrade over the previous 16. At launch it came in 5 colors. So you could go for the matte black. This replaced the old space gray color. There was also a really unique jet black finish. This one is so polished that it actually looks like glass, but it is still aluminum. As you can expect, this one was really prone to micro scratches. You could also go for the classic silver and 2 choices of golds. So you had the very pink-like rose gold color, as well as the more traditional yellow gold. So 5 color choices was already a lot. The 6S had just introduced having 4 color options 1 year back. But in March of 2016, we got this 6th option here with the Product Red. This was actually the first Product Red iPhone ever. The Product Red partnership itself was not new. Apple had been doing that on the iPod lineup for quite a while. So it was really cool to see it come to the iPhone. This card here in the literature packet kind of explains that partnership. So basically, Apple would give a portion from this iPhone's purchase to the Global HIV and AIDS Fund. And I forgot to mention this before, but you did have a Product Red badge under the iPhone text. This red and silver look was just so unique. Future Product Red iPhones would be matched to black details. Another nice detail of this Product Red design is that when you would flip the mute switch, the indicator inside was actually white. So it's a little bit hard to see, but that was just a nice touch compared to the orange on other devices. I decided to go ahead and pull out 3 other Product Red iPhones I own. So I have the iPhone 11 here, I have the 2nd generation SE, as well as the 12 mini. These all kind of look different because they have glass back panels. So yeah, the 7 Plus definitely sticks out as being the only Product Red model with an aluminum back panel. Plus, I did check and all of the other models have orange indicators for the mute switch. But now let's take a second to talk about iOS 10 on the 7 Plus specifically. So this was the first version to ditch the slide to unlock interface that we had always had on iPhones. Instead, it was replaced with press home to open, as sliding on the lock screen now brought up this widget view. Also, there was something new called raise to wake. Basically, the device would just sense when you picked it up and turn on the display. This was actually necessitated by how fast the 2nd generation Touch ID sensor was. That launched back on the iPhone 6S, and basically it would authenticate so quickly that if you would click the home button to wake your device, you just wouldn't have a chance to read the notifications on your lock screen. While we are on that topic, let's take a look at the Touch ID setup here in the Settings app. So it's really easy, just resting and lifting your finger from the sensor repeatedly. You could add up to 5 fingerprints and rename them. Also, if you forgot which was which, you could just rest your finger on the sensor and it would highlight it. Now we'll see how quickly the device unlocks. And yeah, it's really fast. I know many people who miss Touch ID on the iPhone. We ended up getting Face ID later in 2017 on the iPhone 10. But Touch ID does still live on today on the Mac as well as iPads. Also, iOS 10 was the last version to support 32-bit applications. You got a really cool landscape home screen option on the Plus model. This had been around since the iPhone 6 Plus, and it was just really cool to have. The Notification Center also worked in this orientation as well as Control Center. This look for Control Center was actually completely unique to iOS 10. There was a 2-page design, and you would actually have a 3rd page be available if you had smart home accessories connected. iOS 7 through 9 had everything consolidated on 1 page. And the version right after this, iOS 11, simplified everything into a design that pretty much is the same as what we have today. So we're just left with this really unique look for iOS 10 only. You could 3D touch on these elements for some extra options. But yeah, leave me a comment below with what you think about the iOS 10 Control Center. There were also some features exclusive to the Plus model with the keyboard. So if you would rotate the device to landscape orientation, you would get some extra options. So different things with the clipboard, dictation, and other punctuation marks. Also, here's a look at the emojis for iOS 10. Also, some other apps had some nice functionality in landscape mode. Settings here was one of them, so you had this 2-column view. There were some new features in iOS 10 with the Messages application. So we have these things here that the splash screen is mentioning, but this is actually not talking about what I was thinking of. So I remember with iOS 10 that the App Store was new for the Messages app specifically. I'm pretty sure it was called Game Pigeon that you could download and play games with your friends over text. I remember spending a crazy amount of hours playing iMessage Pool as well as Cup Pong. Let's try out Siri on iOS 10 now. Tell me a joke.
My friend can figure out what video game system to get and he's kind of upset about it. Nobody can console him.
So there's what Siri looks like on iOS 10. The voice honestly sounds very unnatural. I'm pretty sure it was like iOS 11 when Siri began to sound a little bit more authentic. Also new for iOS 10 was this Home app. And as the name suggests, this would allow you to add smart home accessories to control with your iPhone. Early versions of iOS 10 had the old school Videos app, but starting with iOS 10.2, we had this TV app. And now we'll take a second to look through these apps that I downloaded from the App Store. So pretty much all just some nostalgic games. Things like Grand Theft Auto, Fruit Ninja, and Temple Run. Also, I was going to sync my iTunes library to this, but I actually just signed in and Apple Music is working really well. A little bit slow and laggy, but yeah, the streaming is working. So that pretty much concludes my look at this Product Red iPhone 7 Plus. This one took a little bit of work with the battery replacement and everything, but it was totally worth it. This is an absolute dream legacy iOS device for me, and I honestly never thought I would find one of these in the red color. Where these were only sold for around 6 months, they're just pretty hard to come by. So yeah, be sure to leave me a comment below with your thoughts. And as always, get subscribed for more legacy iOS device content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.